Greetings, friends and brethren. This is Dr. Bob Thiel of the Continuing Church of God. A lot's been going on in the world. People have wondered what's happening. I want to talk about the beginning of sorrows as well as the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Many people have heard about them. And in the book of Revelation, we learn that there's various seals, and various seals are opened, and they have different meanings. I'm going to focus primarily on four of those seals. If you'd like, we're going to go to the book of Revelation. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 5 for just a moment and read a couple of verses here. Revelation 5, starting verse 1. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on a throne a scroll written inside, and on the back sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?" And then if you go to chapter 6, you end up seeing seals that are beginning to be opened. And because of when this was written, this book, we know that what the seals associated with the Four Horsemen were not opened prior to, that's probably 95 AD or so, which is probably when the Apostle John penned this. And therefore, there's got to be some type of end-time fulfillment of the different seals. Now, it's also possible that the Horsemen of Revelation 6 could be related to the 4 chariots of the same color in Zechariah 6, 1 through 7. However, the sequence in the Revelation is more consistent with Matthew 24 in terms of some of the things Jesus talked about with the beginning of sorrows. Anyway, all 4 of the seals associated with what are called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are going to be opened prior to the start of the Great Tribulation. Now, either they're going to be opened over a relatively long period of time, like years or decades, and are connected with what Jesus called the beginning of sorrows, or they're separate from that and only cover a short period of time, like days or weeks. Now, let's start by looking at the first one of the Four Horsemen. This is in Revelation 6, starting in verse 1. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a loud voice like thunder, "Come and see." So this is something he was told to come and see. And John did. He says, "I looked, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer." Now, somewhat paralleling the ride of the First Horseman of Revelation 6, 2, Jesus warned about false religion. So if you want, you can go to Matthew 24. I'm going to read verses 4 and 5, at least that's my plan. Matthew 24, starting in verse 4, Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceive you. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." And the old Worldwide Church of God said that the Bible identifies Satan's ministers as professing Christians, and they were citing 2 Corinthians 11 regarding this, and that's the case. And then one of the things that the old Worldwide Church of God taught, the horseman aboard the white horse in Revelation is a subtle counterfeit. And I'd like to read something from beyond the old Worldwide Church of God. Prior to that, this is something from around 1918. A Church of God leader named G.G. Rupert wrote that Christ is the king of his people and head of one church. All other organizations are but imitations and counterfeits. They are left under the influence of Satan to practice every deception of the name Christianity that Satan wishes them to do and teach. We say that the Greek, the Roman, and Protestant organizations are all daughters of modern Babylon, the Baal woman, who's a representative of the work of Satan in every age. So the idea that within the Church of God, that, for example, the Protestant faith, and we've had a series of sermons on that. We have a new book on this, Hope of Salvation of the Continuing Church of God, Difference from Protestantism. The idea that these were not part of the true Christian faith is not a new idea, for example, that the old Radio or Worldwide Church of God came up with. Now, In 1973, in the Old Worldwide Church of God, it had a booklet that said, on First Horseman, it says, the long-term condition of false religion described will culminate in the end-time fulfillment of the white horseman of Revelation 6, in the person of a great false prophet. He will signal the beginning of sorrows, the first horseman. Well, this horseman is going to work to conquer the truth as well as to push an ecumenical and interfaith movement. The fact that the horse is white indicates the message is supposed to look good to others. And I mentioned before about 2 Corinthians 11. So let me actually read a couple of verses in there, starting in verse 12. Something the Apostle Paul warned. Paul wrote, starting verse 12, 2 Corinthians 11, but what I do, I will also continue to do, that I may be cut off the opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in the things which they boast. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ, which is what the white rider of the white horse is going to try to do. And no wonder, verse 14, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it's no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Paul's warning that people are going to claim to be true Christians, Christian leaders, and these leaders are going to try to come across as ministers of righteousness, but instead, like G.G. Rupert wrote, be on Satan's side. Now, in a message in the 20th century, the late Pastor General of the Old Worldwide Church of God, Herbert W. Armstrong, taught, Revelation 6:2, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. This is a picture of the ministers of Satan and not Christ. Now, why a bow? Why could a bow be connected to Satan? Well, I actually saw an old television program on the History Channel. It was made back in 2009. And there was a commentator on it. They asked various ones questions, but a woman who was on it said she felt that the bow was representing the power of the air. She didn't quote Ephesians 2:2. You don't have to go there, but I'm going to read it here. But Satan is called the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience. Bows also work over a distance, and that's consistent with what leaders of the ecumenical and interfaith movements are working on. They're kind of working behind the scenes at a distance to try to get to the point where everybody will accept some version of this. And almost everybody who survives for a time will. Now, what's going to happen is they're going to get various laws in place that are going to be associated with the beast and the false prophet. Now, getting back to Herbert W. Armstrong, something else he taught, he said the first horseman is not the coming of Christ. It was the false Christ deceiving the people. For one thing, it was long after Christ had come. John wrote this in 90 AD, and Christ had come and was crucified and gone to heaven in 31 AD. So you see, it's talking about something else, not something that happened. This is a prophecy for the future. And in its booklet on the rider of the white horse, the Old Worldwide Church of God taught, were Christ to return in the white horse of Revelation 6, he would precede the darkest, most troubled time period there is history, known as the Great Tribulation. A quick comparison of Joel 2:31, Matthew 24:29-30, Revelation 6:12-17 will show that Christ doesn't return until after this Great Tribulation. I'm going to read a little bit more there, but basically there are some within the Protestant community and some other professing Christian communities who believe the white horse rider of the white horse is Jesus. And this explanation says, look, you look at the Bible, it can't possibly have been Jesus. It's not. And getting back to the booklet, it says, Christ's second coming ushers in a peaceful period known as the millennium. The white horseman of Revelation 6, on the other hand, is a harbinger of a series of calamitous events that culminate in the prophesied Great Tribulation. Now, when I was part of the Old Worldwide Church of God, many seem to think that the Four Horsemen began their ride in the first century. However, the predominant position in Old Worldwide Church of God literature was they had began their ride and it was for the future, which, for example, Herbert Armstrong said. So and he died in 1986. Now afterwards, there was an agreement in 1999 between the Roman Catholics and the Lutherans. But that didn't seem to change much for a while. But now in the 21st century, we've seen a lot of suggestions that the white horse seems to be moving about. Now the first seal is opened prior to the Great Tribulation. And according to Jesus' words, the beginning of sorrows also precedes the tribulation. Now, speculatively, it could have officially began as early as perhaps the Feast of Trumpets back in September 2009, if the first seal, in a sense, was not opened centuries ago or will not be opened just right at the end. We know there was a type of antitype because there was Simon Magus in Acts chapter 8, verses 9 to 24. But since Magus and others were around before John penned Revelation, they were not obviously the final ride of the First Horseman, because the seal couldn't have been opened before John saw the seal open. Furthermore, it will not be till after the beast powers of Revelation 13 are in full control when the whole world will worship the beast and the dragon. You can read about that in Revelation 13. And that will be when the horseman's conquest, if you will, is complete sometime during that time. Now, I've speculated before that it's possible that the beginning of sorrows began September 19, 2009, or shortly thereafter. During the Feast of Tabernacles in October 2009, some sense came over me of something of prophetic importance had happened. Like what? Like we were in the beginning of sorrows. I hadn't been watching the news, but I sensed it began right then, or maybe it began at the Feast of Trumpets that year. So after returning from the Feast of Tabernacles, I did some research to see if any major ecumenical event happened around then. So I wondered, could the first seal, the ride of the white horse of the apocalypse, have began in 2009? Turns out there was a meeting of the Eastern Orthodox back then, which seemed to embrace the ecumenical agenda of the white horseman of Revelation 6. And that seemed to be consistent with the first sorrow Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24, verse 4 and 5. During the period of September 15th to 22nd, 2009, the Eastern Orthodox held a significant pan-Orthodox conference working towards unity, by the way, was one of its objectives. I'm going to read something from an official Eastern Orthodox website. Responding to the invitation of the World Council of Churches to offer a theological contribution to the process leading to the 2011 International Ecumenical Peace Convocation, an inter-Orthodox preparatory consultation was held on the island of Leros, Greece, 15 to 22nd September 2009. The gathering was most graciously hosted on behalf of His Most Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew by Metropolitan Pais of Leros and other parts of Greece. The meeting brought together 25 participants from nearly all Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox churches, etc. Now, the meeting itself didn't seem to be too much, but notice it was a partial response to a call for something happening from the World Council of Churches. Now, after that meeting, a few weeks later, on October 15, 2009, the Vatican's then top ecumenical official reported, the official dialogue between the Catholic Church and mainline Protestant churches, Anglican, Lutheran, Reformed, Methodist, is entering a new phase, said the President of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, Cardinal Walter Casper. So it was called a new phase in the official dialogue. That suggests major change was happening. Now, the next day, the Vatican and the Orthodox began a new round of ecumenical negotiations. The meeting took place from the 16th to 23rd of October 2009. They also talked about people who didn't like this idea, and they went through various things. They also had a show of unity initiated by the Lutheran World Federation in 2017. They did some tree planting ceremony and all this kind of stuff that they're working on. Anyway, so it seems possible that the beginning of sorrows that Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, 4-8. Began on or near September 19, 2009. I should mention that I told the presiding evangelist of our prior church in November of 2009 that I thought the beginning of sorrows may have started as early as September 19, 2009, or shortly thereafter. And I explained to him why. Later, it was interesting, prior to that particular church most of the time put stuff out that, like, the beginning of sorrows was near. Afterwards, they started to put stuff out that it actually had began, and I confirmed that with one of their evangelists who's still there. Now, however, I've noticed this past week they pulled some of the commentaries that said that, so I'm not sure what their official position is. They're inconsistent on it. But for a while, they were officially, through their, I'll call it officially, it was not in their statement of beliefs, but it was in their official publications that it had begun. Now, consider that this first seal is to be, or was, opened around the time that one who's going to be the false prophet successfully works with a group to reconnect with Rome. And there's various ones who are alive right now who could have been doing so. And interestingly, a little bit later, on September 20th, 2016, a Catholic publication referred to ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, he's Eastern Orthodox, as the great ecumenist. By the way, the sun-worshipping Emperor Constantine is also called great for his compromising and his blending of religions together. You know, he's the one who claimed to see a sun god and then later a cross in the sky. He impacted world history, and the Patriarch of Constantinople seems to be doing it as well, but a lot more subtly as far as the world's concerned. And there's been a lot of events over the past several years that point to this. We've seen various Protestants and others to go along this line. What about this year? Well, actually, a minute ago about last year, there was many documents and meetings between the Pope Francis of Rome and the Muslims. But this year, in 2020, on January 25th, 2020, an ecumenical document was signed by the Roman Catholics, the Orthodox, the Anglicans, the Evangelicals, at least some of them, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the Methodists. It was, and this news article says, a historic ecumenical charter was signed by these groups. It says the most important task of the church is to proclaim the gospel together through word and action. I should comment that while some Seventh-day Adventist leaders have opposed this, if you're Seventh-day Adventist, quote, officially, quote, Seventh-day Adventists stress the connection that many Roman Catholics are brothers and sisters in Christ. And this is from how the Seventh-day Adventists view Roman Catholicism. From the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Committee released to the Office of President. Now, my prayer for all, including Seventh-day Adventists, is to seek the truth, change, and hold to and contend for the faith once for all delivered to the saints, as it says in Jude 3. And to come out of Babylon, which the Bible warns about, for example, in Revelation 17 and 18, those chapters. Well, the riot of the White Horseman is going to worsen from what we've seen so far, particularly around the time the fifth seal is open. Now, interestingly, there are Catholic writings that say in the future, some people are going to wear crosses and they're going to persecute. And that they're going to have a leader who's going to do a new religious order. Now, that leader is not the rider of the first horse, but he'll have somebody, a false prophet, who's going to work with him. But they're going to do this, and they plan on doing this a couple different ways. Right now, you've got people like Pope Francis working with the United Nations and others to lay out a new world agenda, a new universal agenda, a new Catholic agenda, help setting the stage for the rise of the beast of Revelation, also known as the King of the North, in Daniel chapter 11. And I won't read the Catholic prophecies on this, but there are many that look forward to this and them eliminating heretics and those who won't go along with their changed religion. And as far as changed religion, if you're Roman Catholic, I want to comment that the Bible shows that this King of the North leader will do something, push a God people didn't know, along with one that they did. Catholic writings say he's going to establish a new religious order. I believe this means that the beast and the false prophet are going to change the Roman Catholic religion further, and it will be a further compromised faith that is going to be that which is going to conquer, if you will, with the ride of the white horse. I believe we are in the end times, and therefore I do believe that the rider, it being the figurative rider, but being the false prophet, that the person who will be that false prophet is alive right now. He's had a role for a number of years, mostly working behind the scenes. That's going to change. Now let's talk about the red horse. And let's go to Revelation chapter 6. I'm going to start in verse 3. When he opened the second seal, I heard a second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out. Well, by the way, you probably can't see this very well, but here's an artist's portrayal of how those horsemen looked. Okay. Anyway, talking about the red one. Fiery red went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. Two different things going on here. And there was given to him a great sword. Now, somewhat paralleling this, Jesus said some things in Matthew 24. I'm going to go to verse 6. Jesus taught, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom." Now, I want to read something from the old Worldwide Church of God 1973 book and explain why I think this is an error. As the first horseman rides forth conquering and to conquer in the name of his false religion, the second horseman, war, is quick on his heels as that instrument of conquest. I think this is not the case. She pointed out that although sometimes the old Worldwide Church of God literature saw all the horses coming rapidly after each other, let's go to Luke chapter 21 to look at Jesus' words. I read from Matthew 24. You see the same concept in Luke 21 here. Verse 8. "And he said," this is Jesus, "Take heed that you do not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he.'" And people are going to say Jesus is the Christ. It's part of the whole ecumenical part. That's why they think they can proclaim the same gospel. It won't be the gospel of the kingdom of God. It's not going to be the true gospel they want to proclaim, but they will say Jesus is some version of the Christ. "The time is drawn near, therefore do not go after them. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified, for these things must come to pass, but the end will not come immediately." Now, how long of a time gap there might be between the horsemen isn't specified, but I think Jesus' statement suggests a significant gap. And a gap we've been in has been a fair amount of time, or a long time, since perhaps the beginning of the ride of the First Horseman. Now notice that the opening of the second seal results in even less peace on the earth. Now, while this is commonly called the red horse or horseman of war, and I've used that expression myself, that's not quite what is stated. If you notice in Revelation 6, what does it say? It says that he takes peace from the earth and that people should kill one another. Could it be that events in late 2019, such as COVID-19, are consistent with taking peace from the earth? All around the world, people are afraid. The feeling of normalcy is gone for many around the globe. Consider that the travel restrictions are there because of fear. Media and the government officials are saying everything will not go back to the way how it is, at least not for a while, and we have to accept what they're calling the new normal. Now, speculatively, could this be associated with The opening of the second seal, taking peace or feelings of peace, perhaps from the earth. Not since World War II have we seen anything affect the entire planet so much as this. Now, I've had kind of a gnawing feeling for a while. The second seal was opened either in the late spring, early summer of 2020, and perhaps it was even as far back as October of 2019. Now, the literal Greek here for this word peace, which is transliterated as arianen, can be interpreted to mean take away prosperity as well. Now, COVID-19, to a degree, has done that. People are afraid, or at least uneasy to a degree that we haven't seen around the world any time in the 21st century. Now, I'd like to read something from Barnes' Notes on the Bible. This is a Protestant commentary. It says, "The power given to him that sat on the horse, and the power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and they should kill one another." Okay, and I read that, Revelation 6. This would seem to indicate that the condition immediately preceding this was a condition of tranquility. And we've had wars since World War II, but we haven't had anything quite like World War II since. And this is now disturbed by some cause producing discord and bloodshed. And millions of people have been diagnosed with COVID-19. It's over 10 million at the time I'm saying this. Hundreds of thousands have died. So we call that bloodshed, if you will. This idea, get back to Barnes' Notes, is confirmed by the original words, and they list it in Greek. The peace, that is precisely existing peace. When peace in general is referred to, the word is without the definite article. Definite article meaning peace. Okay? Like when Jesus says, "Think not I came to send peace upon the earth." So this rider is not just a rider of war, but he's one that takes away the peace. In the Greek language, they use a definite article, a word for the, what we call in English, a lot. Way more than we use in English. And it's not usually used with peace, but in this place it is used for the peace. Now consider that taking away peace or prosperity by the rider of the red horse isn't going to stop the peace deal of Daniel 9:27. And that deal, the temporary deal, is going to be broken. Nor is it going to prevent Mystery Babylon the Great from having a time of prosperity. Because actually, according to Daniel 11, verses 39 to 43, war is going to bring wealth and prosperity to the king of the north. Now, we're not going to have constant warfare everywhere with the ride of the red horseman, presuming it's supposed to start prior to the time of Great Tribulation, substantially before then. But things are going to end up getting worse. Okay, ultimately, it's going to end in Armageddon. I want to read something from a Worldwide Church of God book regarding the rider of the red horse. It says, where is this all going to end? The 12 disciples Jesus wanted to know. Jesus talked about it in Matthew chapter 24. Olivet prophecy says wars and rumors of wars. There have always been wars. Certainly Christ's words are particularly meaning for that day and age. Within a few short decades of then, the Roman legions under the command of General Titus sacked, burned, and pillaged the city of Jerusalem. But Jesus' warning about war is applicable to another period of history. In the book of Revelation, Christ speaking through the Apostle John amplified some of the prophetic statements. In the sixth chapter, John writes, verse 4, "So another horse, red, power is given to take away peace from the earth," etc. John was not speaking about the fall of Jerusalem. That already was 20 years behind him. John was referring to future events that would bring 6,000 years of human history crashing to a cataclysmic close. Now, I want to comment one thing here. The old Worldwide Church of God, as well as my prior church affiliation, taught that the Four Horsemen, the four seals, are tied to the beginning of sorrows in Matthew 24. Those four. Four of the seals respond to four of the sorrows listed there. Which means, if we're in the beginning of sorrows, at least one of the seals of the four horsemen have been opened. And I'm wondering if the second seal was open as far back as October, or maybe sometime early this year, or maybe about to be open. Anyway, talking about this, the Worldwide Church of God wrote, John is referring to a time yet ahead of us, when peaceful coexistence will be a thing of the past. It's no wonder Jeremiah, referring to these tumultuous times, stated, "Alas, for that day is great, since none like it. It's the time of Jacob's trouble." But that doesn't happen until the opening of the fifth seal. So you've got the opening of the second seal first. And we may see wars in parts of the world that rarely have them. Maybe, perhaps, between some South American nations. A lot is going on with Korea. We could see civil and other civil unrest in North America and in Europe. We have seen looting and riots and civil unrest in the United States. And the day I'm doing this, supposedly a lot of demonstrations are going to happen sometime today. So we're in a time where we're seeing things getting into place for this. And again, there's this uneasiness around the world because of COVID-19 and all these other types of things associated with it. Now, the Bible talks about a military leader rising up. Catholic prophecy looks forward to somebody called the Great Monarch. According to one of their prophets, one by the name of Holshouser, who died in 1658, the Great Monarch will have the special help of God and be unconquerable. Well, the Bible says that people are going to wonder about this beast, and we'll get to some scriptures about him. But he's going to come in talking peace. And this will deceive people. Daniel 8:25, I want to read from the Old King James. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he will also magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, and he'll be broken without hand. See, by peace he's going to destroy many. So during the time of the ride of the red horse, there's going to be some peace, because the Bible's teaching it. There's going to be some peace, but he's still going to destroy. Now, Daniel chapter 11, starting in verse 23. Now, this time I'm going to go to the New King James. Talks about this leader, the king of the north. Daniel 11, verse 23. And after the league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully. Right, he's the one promising peace, but not doing it. For he shall come up and be strong with a small number of people. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, like the United States, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. He will do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers. Unlike World War I and World War II, which were not successful for the Central European power, nor he shall disperse them among the spoil and riches, and he shall devise his plans against the strongholds, the strongest military, but only for a time. He's going to give the people, particularly in Europe, the impression he's for peace. He's going to be one involved in confirming the deal of Daniel 9:27. This leader is a European, by the way. It's not U.S. President Donald Trump. Jesus talked about the beginning of sorrows. I've been in Matthew 24 a few times. And cutting into the end of verse 6, it says, Jesus said the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. And these, again, tie in with, many of these tie in with the four seals of Revelation 6. The first four seals of Revelation 6. Now, back in 1968, the old Worldwide Church of God published the following. Actually, the word sorrows means trials or tribulations, or tribulation. So Jesus is saying these are the beginning of tribulation, which will lead to the Great Tribulation. I believe we are in the beginning of sorrows. What looks to be the first horseman of the apocalypse spreading false interfaith and ecumenical gospels has been becoming more and more prominent in the world, seen in the past decade or so. They claim Jesus is the Christ, but they don't truly act like it, and they are deceiving many. And, there are issues in the world right now with Israel, Syria, and Iran, and the Palestinians. That's something else I've been watching and expecting for this year. I think I told somebody a couple months ago, they asked me what I was watching in terms of world events, and I mentioned to do with Iran, and I think I also told them Iran, Israel, Syria, and probably the Palestinians. Now, the opening, again, of the second seal isn't the Great Tribulation, because the Great Tribulation does not begin until the fifth seal is open. And Jesus taught before the Great Tribulation, here in Matthew 24, verse 21, is when he uses the term Great Tribulation. We expect wars, rumors of wars, and various sorrows before then. Now, what leads to the ride of the horsemen, including one of war? Well, Satan. Let's go to Revelation 12, starting verse 7. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. They did not prevail, nor was place found for them in heaven any longer. So the dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Go down to verse 12. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. Now, Satan deceives the world with religious ways, and he's a factor in the ride of the white horsemen and others. He's stirring up unrest around the world, and this includes Europe. Now, I talked about this later. We're going to go to Revelation 13. Talked about this later, and in the Old Testament it talks about he's going to enter peaceably, but he's really going to be a man of war. Revelation 13, starting verse 1, read a little bit about him. I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast come out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head set a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and a deadly wound was healed. There's a couple of ways to look at this. One is, for example, the old Holy Roman Empire. The other is Europe's German attempts to take over the world a couple of times, or at least parts of it. Also, perhaps this particular leader looked like he was wounded and wouldn't be able to rise up. Anyway, continuing, the Bible says, and the world marveled and followed the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Now notice he's the beast of the sea. This sea, according to Daniel 7, verse 2 to 8, is the Great Sea, which is further identified to be called as the Mediterranean Sea, which you can read in the book of Numbers or Joshua and Ezekiel. And we've got a video on that you can watch about that. Once this beast decides to make massive war, at first he is going to be successful. But before then, he's going to probably quell civil unrest in places like Europe, maybe even civil war. But because of his involvement in the deal of Daniel 9:27, his quelling of unrest, he's going to be, in his words, he's going to be considered a peacemaker. But let's go to Daniel 8. Daniel 8:24 talks about this leader. His power will be mighty, but not his own power. He will destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty, and also the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule. He shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. I mentioned the United States, the Five Eyes people, nations, United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and United Kingdom. If you're in Daniel, go a few chapters later, Daniel 11, verse 39, where we see what I believe is the prophecy of the elimination of the United States. Daniel 11, verse 39 says, he, this is the king of the north, and we know that because in verse 40 he's called the king of the north, same he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god. Who's got the strongest fortresses, strongest military? Well, the United States does now. Which he shall acknowledge and advance his glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. Yes, the Bible prophesies the strongest military power will be taken over, and the land will be divided for gain. Now this beast leader, who's called the King of the North, is going to also eliminate certain lands dominated by Islam. If you're continuing in verse 40, the Bible says, at the time of the end, so we see it's the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north will come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. We're seeing Europe right now building its military. Daniel 11:25 says Europe is going to have a great army. Anyway, he's going to enter the glorious land. These are going to escape Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. This in the Middle East. He's going to stretch out his hands against countries. The land of Egypt will not escape. He'll have power over the treasures of gold and silver. This is one of the ways he's going to prosper. And over the precious things of Egypt and the Libyans. And this says Ethiopians in this translation, but it means Cushites will be at his heels. So this leader is going to be successful militarily for a while. But that's still not enough. Satan wants to see more destroyed. And he's going to encourage people to gather in Armageddon. Let's go to Revelation chapter 16. Starting verse 13. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. Now that's Revelation 9. I probably told you Revelation 16. I'm going to go to Revelation 16, but that was Revelation 9 starting verse 13. Now let's go to Revelation 16 verse 13. I saw three unclean spirits like frogs, which shows, of course, frogs are still considered unclean, coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are a spirit of demons, performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. In verse 16 of Revelation 16, they gathered them together in a place called, in Hebrew, Armageddon. Now, if you go to the next chapter, it's not going to turn out well for those who so gathered. Revelation 17 verse 14 says, "These will make war with the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords, King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful." And hopefully that includes you. You don't have to go there, but Daniel 2:44 says, "In those days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and the kingdom will not be left to other people. It shall break into pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Now, if you go to Revelation 11, verse 8, you're going to find out that people are not happy that Jesus is coming back because they've been deceived, partially by the white horse, partially by signs and lying wonders which would be associated with the false prophet. Revelation 11 verse 18 says, "The nations were angry. Your wrath has come, the time of the dead they should be judged, and you should reward your servants, the prophets and the saints, and those who fear your name, the small and the great, and should destroy those who destroy the earth." And in Revelation 19, we see the end of the ride, also helps show the end of the ride of the Second Horseman. Revelation 19, starting in verse 15, "Now out of his mouth," this is Jesus' mouth, "goes a sword. He should strike the nations. He'll rule with a rod of iron." And he's got a robe, and on his thigh the name is written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then I saw an angel, verse 17, cried out with a voice, "Come, gather birds for the supper of the great God. You may eat the flesh of kings, captains, etc., etc., flesh of people small and great, free and slave." I saw the beasts, the kings of the earth, and the armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse against his army. This is Jesus. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence. And this is why one of the reasons people are going to fall for all this stuff. By which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshiped his image. And 2 were cast alive in the lake burning with fire and brimstone. The rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse. So even though we're seeing a lot of military boasting and posturing, much more is going to happen. But right now we're in a period of time where it seems like peace has been taken from the earth. Now history, as well as the words of Jesus, tend to show that food shortages, or at least food inflation, comes after wars. And the third horseman, that comes after the red horse, represents scarcity. Let's go to Revelation chapter 6. Starting in verse 5. When I opened the third seal, I saw a third living creature. I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hands. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and don't harm the oil and the wine." Now, this is basically saying that food inflation is associated with the ride of the third horse, the black horse. Well, it's commonly called the black horse of famine. The word famine is not in Revelation 6, 5 to 6. Now, it doesn't mean there won't be any famines, because there will. Jesus talked about it, that. But food inflation should be considered. Part of it may be because of government overprinting of money related to COVID-19, crop matters, trade issues, etc. So partially because of this, most aren't going to attribute this to the ride of the third horseman or the opening of the third seal. And yes, some are going to die because they're not going to be able to afford the food. But while others are going to survive but struggle. But then in parts of Europe for a time in the world, people are going to prosper. Now I want to read something from the old Worldwide Church of God booklet on this. The black horseman's future ride will reduce the proud faces of white America, Europe, the British Commonwealth, into the blackened skin of starvation, such as now afflicts much of humankind. Now we're talking about famines and all that stuff. This is from the old Worldwide Church of God. I don't think I need to go into any more of that. There's a booklet that they have. You can read. It's online. Anyway, we are seeing more reports of food shortages in different places, partially due to, or a lot due to, government policies related to COVID-19 disrupting the food supply all over the place. Even in the United States, although we're not seeing starvation in the United States, we've had shortages here and things not available and empty shelves in supermarkets and things like that. But famine is also going to happen. Now, I also should mention that I believe, particularly in the United States, as well as parts of Asia and any other land that's heavily dependent upon genetically modified crops, that's going to set the stage for some serious food shortages. Now, while Mystery Babylon, the great at the end, is going to prosper for a while, it too will be affected by the ride of the third horseman of famine and food shortages. Because in Revelation 18, you don't have to go there, verse 2 talks about Babylon, but verse 8 says, "Her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine." But again, consider the following. This happens after the 5th seal has been opened. This is after the time of the Great Tribulation, at the end of the time of the Great Tribulation. So therefore, the third seal, has to be opened prior to then. Okay? Food inflation, food shortages, and famines are coming. Now let's talk about the fourth horseman. History, as well as the words of Jesus tend to show that pestilences and death follow food shortages. Now let's go to Revelation 6, and start reading in verse 7. I want to go through this a little bit differently, perhaps I've done in the past. Revelation 6, starting in verse 7. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I, that's John, looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So you see a fourth of the earth. That's something in the neighborhood of 2 billion people. This is a huge amount. But notice that deaths associated with the ride of the previous 2 horses are also in here. Because we see power is given to kill with the sword, with hunger, which would have to be associated with the black horse, with death, doesn't define it completely there what that means, and by the beasts of the earth. This beasts of the earth would refer to pestilences, as well as death may be referring to that as well. Now, this suggests, to me at least, that at first there won't be so much death associated with the ride of Second and Third Horseman that many expect. Because of that, many will not understand what's happening. Now, this includes Christians, because only a portion of Christians are promised to be spared from the hour of trial that comes upon the whole world, according to Jesus. Read about that in Revelation 3, verses 7 to 10. Now consider that according to Jesus, 1 or more significant pestilences are going to begin before the start of the Great Tribulation. It seems likely that the United States and its Anglo-Saxon Celtic descended allies are going to be hard hit by them just before being taken over by the beast power. As I said before, this current wave of COVID-19 isn't this yet. Now, not only, however, will no pestilence stop the rise of the Babylonian beast power, I believe that it will help encourage the rise of this particular leader. Now, I'd like to read something from the old Worldwide Church of God regarding the ride of the Fourth Horseman. It says, in the book of Revelation, we find a disturbing vision of 4 fearsome horsemen. Each of these horsemen is a symbol of 4 major punishments to be inflicted upon a rebellious mankind, probably not in the too distant future. So again, this is from 1975, this particular one. So back in 1975, the position of the Worldwide Church of God was these things were for the future, and for them they certainly were. Then it says in Revelation 6:8, John writes, behold, I saw a pale horse, the rider's name was Death, and Hades, the grave, followed with him. They're given power of the fourth of the earth to kill, like I just said. And according to, this is from, again, the old Worldwide Church of God, the Olivet prophecy, that's only the beginning of sorrows. Much more is to follow as the world moves to its darkest moments in its entire history. Jeremiah calls it the time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah 37. Christ said there would be a great tribulation, was such not the beginning of the world, nor ever shall be. But Jesus promised to protection of his own elect. Fortunately for humankind, God's not only going to save the elect, but millions of others will be protected for the elect's sake. God's going to stop the death stroke of the Fourth Horseman before it sweeps all humankind from the earth. Now, we're doing things that make this more probable. I mean, I shouldn't say more probable, it's going to happen. But human beings are doing things that are contributing to some of the negative things associated with the ride of the horseman. Before we talk about the fourth one, let's talk about the first one for a moment. You've got a world that doesn't respect this book. You've got people who don't believe in God, despite the fact that they claim to be scientists. And I'm looking for a particular book that I want to hold up here. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not seeing the one I'm looking for. Well, while I look for that one, I'll also say most of humanity has not proven that Jesus is the Messiah. And they teach a different Jesus. Now, this book and any other one I may hold up is available at the ccog.org website. Go into the literature tab under books and booklets, and you'll find it. All right, book I was looking. Oh, here's the one I was trying to show. Called "Is God's Existence Logical?" I want to read something from the back cover of this book. Nobel Prize winner Dr. George Wald from Harvard University stated the following: "The reasonable view was to believe in spontaneous generation, life from nothing. The only alternative is to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation. There is no third position. One only has to contemplate the magnitude of this task to concede that the spontaneous generation of life of a living organism is impossible. Yet, here we are as a result, I believe, of spontaneous generation." So why am I telling you that? The reason that the white horse, rider of the white horse can ride is because we have people who said they were going to believe the impossible. So there's the back cover. Okay? If something is impossible, it can't happen. So what do they do in schools? They teach evolution as the origin of life. It is impossible. Scientists who look at it know it's impossible. Okay? So then they discount the Bible. Say, well, God didn't make everything. But so wait a second. If your explanation is impossible, the only other one is that there was some supernatural being who did it. But they keep picking and picking at it and believing stuff they know is not true and teaching stuff that they know is not true. It's getting worse and worse. That was prophesied at the end times. Deceivers would wax worse and worse. And we're to be careful. And this is what allows the ride of the first horseman, if you will. Yes, I know it's prophesied, but God knew what was going to happen. He knew what humankind was going to do. And what about the rider of the second horse, the horse of war? Nations are building up to fight all the time. They're building up their militaries. They're doing all kinds of things. You've got civil unrest and looting from time to time. And now with the COVID situation, you've got governments decide that they need to take more control and taking feelings of peace away from the earth. Humans will kill each other and are willing to kill each other over many things. Many things the Bible does not say deserve the death penalty. Humankind was willing to believe God, obey God. We wouldn't have the specter of the ride of the second horseman getting worse and culminating with those who gather at Armageddon and fight against Jesus. The third horse, the rider of the third horse, famine and food shortages. We've got politics that get in the way. We've got greed that gets in the way. We've got genetically modified crops popping up all over. Unlike normal crops, by the way, which have some genetic variation, genetically modified crops are all identical. One single pestilential entity could knock out most of the corn and soybeans, for example, in the United States. And as they have more and more GMO crops, more and more are going to be at risk. Yes, humanity is setting the stage for the ride of these horsemen. And as I say, it seems like the first one started, the second one is about to start, it hasn't already started. And as far as what's going to happen in terms of things, the Bible, let's go to Ezekiel. I want to go to Ezekiel chapter 7. Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 2. "And you, son of man, thus says the Lord God to the land of Israel. An end has come upon the four corners of the end. Now the end has come upon you. I will send my anger against you. I will judge you according to your ways and pay you for your abominations." And we know with the abortions and sexual immorality and not understanding marriage, etc., we're seeing more and more abominations in the land. Now if you're in Ezekiel, let's go down to verse 15 of Ezekiel 7. "The sword is outside, and the pestilence and famine within." Now it sounds like the riders of the four horsemen. And first, as I said, they're abominable, their ways. And because they don't want to stick with the truth, people are putting up with the ride of the first horseman. And anyway, sword is the outside, pestilence and famine within. See all four of them. "Whoever's in the field will die by the sword, and whoever's in the city, famine and pestilence will devour him." This is a prophecy that will affect the United States and its British descended allies. 1/3, let's go to chapter 5 of Ezekiel. I was going there and realizing you probably weren't there, verse 12, because I was in chapter 7. 1/3 of you shall die by pestilence, and be consumed with famine in your midst, and 1/3 will die by the sword around you, and I will scatter another third to the winds and draw out swords against them. Now, why do we think that the warning of Israel includes the United States and its Anglo-Saxon Celtic allies? Well, in addition to prophecies such as in Genesis 48 and 49, Ezekiel points to problems in the four corners of the land. Well, some might point to the tiny nation of Israel, consider that the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, pretty much spread around the corners of the earth. Canada is about as far north as you can go. Australia and New Zealand are pretty far south and east, if you will. The United States is as west as you can go. Okay, of the four corners. Now, the other thing that may cause some of these things is the potential of doomsday bugs. The old Worldwide Church of God, Radio Church of God, wrote about this over 50 years ago. I'm not going to go through all that. But yes, human beings are working on various aspects of biological warfare, and if some of those are released or get out of control, we may have some serious problems. And there are some reasons to consider the possibility that because of human research into viruses, that this is why we have had the COVID-19 situation. You know, with the ride of the Fourth Horseman, ultimately you're going to see this result in the death of a quarter of humankind. Now, that's going to cause massive fear around the world, and before we get to that stage, fear will be a factor in people going for the beast, the king of the north. Now, consider that in March of 2020, the World Health Organization and Iran warned people about actually taking physical cash because of the coronavirus, because of fear of contagion. How much worse when a lot more humans die? Go to Revelation 13, starting verse 16. He causes all, this is the beast and false prophet here, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. His number is 666. Now, when that prophecy was penned, like 1900 years or so ago, you couldn't control buying and selling. But you can in the 21st century. A century where cash is being replaced by digital currency. And what if people get afraid of cash? We see pestilences associated with Jesus' comments about the beginning of sorrows, and this is consistent with being affected by death and the beasts of the earth in Revelation 6, talking about the ride of the Fourth Horseman. With all the natural disasters we've had, such as earthquakes, floods, food shortages, and emerging pestilences, and this religious deception and interfaith stuff that's going on, ecumenical interfaith movements that are going on, understand that these things are all foretold to happen. I've been to Matthew 24, and my notes, I've got all of it again, and I'm not going to read all of these things, but I'm going to go over to some of them. The disciples asked Jesus, what's going to happen? What's going on? What should we be looking for? And Jesus lays out various things, and we've been going through some of those. And he starts off warning about deception, and most people will be deceived. They will not know what's happening until it's basically too late to flee. That includes true Christians, because they're going to dismiss it. It will be too subtle for them to know. Anyway, there's going to be all kinds of things. Jesus said the end is not yet. In verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. He talked about famines and pestilences there as well. In Mark's account, he uses the word troubles as part of the sorrows, and we've certainly had troubles. At minimum, COVID-19 is a trouble. And it also may be a factor in taking away peace from the earth. Anyway, Jesus talks about after this is going to be, they'll kill you and you'll be hated. So we're talking about martyrdom. I'm not going to read this, but you can see martyrdom is going to happen, persecution is going to happen to Philadelphian Christians in Daniel 11, verses, let's say, 32 through 36 or 37 or so, maybe even later. And many are going to be betray one another and hate one another. And when you see the opening of the fifth seal starts to talk about all the dead saints. Let's go and read about the fifth seal for just a moment. And this is Revelation 6, starting in verse 9. It says, he opened the fifth seal, and I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe is given to each of them, said to them, they should rest a little while longer, till the number of their fellow servants and their brethren would be killed as they were, and was completed. We know there's a certain number of people who will be called. The full number of Gentiles, or fullness of the Gentiles, will come in according to what the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans chapter 11, verse 25. But getting back to Daniel, to Matthew and Jesus' words, we see persecutions happening. Then we see the gospel of the kingdom will be preached to the world as a witness in verse 14, and then the end will come. A lot of people think, the gospel's already been preached. No, all these things have to happen. And then the end comes after that's going on, and that's one of the things we in the Continuing Church of God are working on doing. Then we see the abomination, desolation being spoken of. It's time to flee. Pray that your flight will not be in a Sabbath or in the winter. Then there'll be Great Tribulation. So the beginning of sorrows happens before the Great Tribulation. The four seals are open before the fifth seal is open. It may be that the time Jesus referred to as the beginning of sorrows technically does not become considered official until the first of the seven seals is open. And I think this is likely to have occurred because, again, I believe that the false prophet is alive now. Now, it might not officially begin until he gets more prominence. Perhaps it'll be open when an anti-pope takes control and starts to do lying wonders. But again, I suspect that the one who this will be was around back in 2009, working perhaps publicly or even behind the scenes on various ecumenical deceptions. And we've seen various declarations. Now, interestingly, there's an Eastern Orthodox prediction. This is kind of a strange one I want to go into. The Bible talks that sometime during the beginning of sorrows, a prince is going to rise up in Daniel 9:26, 27, who's going to be the final biblical king of the north. And there's some Eastern Orthodox people who've got some weird interpretations of this here. Here's something near the end of the 4th century from Epiphanius, who was a famous historian. He asked, when will come the end of the world? What are the beginning of sorrows? What shall take place? From what signs and events shall humanity be able to know that the end of the world is near, and what signs will be manifest? There's a response from one of their people called Andrew, Fool for Christ. Now, son, how can I relate to you without tears the events of the beginning of sorrows and the end of the world? During the end times, God will reveal as king a certain poor man. He will rule. Happiness will reign in the world as it did in the days of Noah. People will become very rich. Jesus warned about people living as in the days of Noah. Later this king will turn toward the east. He'll humble the Hagarenes, that would be some of the Arabs, for their blasphemous religion. And many will be baptized, and the remaining ones will be annihilated. The entire world will fear this king. He'll pursue all people of the Jewish religion out of Constantinople. The people will rejoice like the time of Noah until the deluge came. Well, according to the Eastern Orthodox, this guy rises up sometime during the beginning of sorrows, and he becomes a king. Again, he's the one they tend to call the Great Monarch. And pursue all people of the Jewish religion. I want to comment that people, if you read Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox writings, they consider people who go to church on Saturday and don't eat unclean meats and keep biblical holy days are type of the Jewish religion. Now, Jesus warned about the days of Noah, but you see there's an Eastern Orthodox prophecy saying it's good to be like the days of Noah. So it's always interesting to me how Satan has some stuff out there so blatant. It should be obvious to people of the Eastern Orthodox Roman Catholic faith that no, at the time of the days of Noah, Jesus warned about this. Anyway, in the 20th century, the old worldwide Church of God correctly taught that the ride of each of the four horsemen was for the future. And we in the continuing Church of God believe that these rides are for the 21st century. Now, it's true that because humankind since Adam in Genesis 3 has rejected living God's way, and humanity's been deceived by false religions, as well as curses like war and famines and pestilences. But we also believe that God's got a 6,000-year plan to let humans live their way, and the planet would get so bad that unless God intervened, Jesus came back, no flesh should be saved. And Jesus says that in Matthew 24, verses 21 to 22. Now, either the ride of one or two of the last horsemen began within the last 11 years or so, which is not clear for most people, or they're going to start quickly before the start of the Great Tribulation. Because of that, it's not going to be clear about for many people. Jesus talked about sorrows that coincided with the seals being opened. And 4 seals are opened before the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation. Let me just read that. Matthew 24:22. Jesus taught, and unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Jesus also taught something, you don't have to go there, but this is, I want to read, but this is Luke 21, verse 36. Watch therefore, and pray always, you may be counted worthy to escape all the things that will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. People everywhere need to watch, pray, to be counted worthy to escape these things, and stand before the Son of Man. All four of the horsemen are going to complete their rides. And the end of the human age, under the God of this world, as Paul calls him in 2 Corinthians 4:4, is going to come to an end. Let's go to Revelation chapter 20, starting verse 1. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven. And this angel has the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who's the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up, set a seal on him that he should not deceive the nations no more for 1,000 years, till the 1,000 years are finished. But after these things he must be released a little while. The Four Horsemen, something Satan wants to have happen. And you think he wouldn't because he will be put away. But he's encouraging humanity to do things that will result in their rides. But God's got a plan in verse 4, also, not for just Satan, but for the rest, for the Christians. I saw thrones, and they that sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. And I saw the souls of them to be beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God. They would not worship the beast or his image. They had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who has part of the first resurrection. For over such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him for 1,000 years. So yes, after the 6,000 years, Satan's been running this world. God will have him put aside, cast him out, and a glorious time, the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, will return. We are getting very close to the ride of all the horsemen, and I suspect we've either seen the antitype with what's been going on with the ecumenical interfaith movements, with peace being taken from the earth, with COVID-19 restrictions, and other steps humans are taking. The end is getting closer, but as Jesus said, watch and pray that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things and stand before him. This is Dr. Bob Thiel, of the Continuing Church of God.